Sussan lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Life had never been easy for her. She was a simple woman who worked as a cleaner in a small office during the day and sold vegetables in the evening at a local market. She did not have much, but she always carried a smile and believed in kindness. One hot afternoon, as Sussan closed from work, she noticed a young lady sitting by the roadside. Her hair was messy, her face looked pale, and her eyes were swollen as though she had been crying. Sussan's heart was moved. She walked closer and said softly, "Are you okay, my dear?" The young lady looked up and forced a smile. I lost my bag. My phone, my money, everything is gone. I don't even know how to get home." Sussan quickly sat beside her. "Oh, poor child. Don't worry. You will be fine. Come with me. You need something to eat." The young lady hesitated at first, looking at Sussan's plain clothes. She wondered if this woman could truly help her. But when she saw the kindness in Sussan's eyes, she agreed. Sussan took her home. It was a small, one-room apartment with barely enough space for her bed and a wooden table. She brought out the little food she had, bread and tea, and served the young lady. "Please eat," Sussan insisted. The girl's eyes watered as she took the bread. She had never seen such kindness from a stranger before. After eating, she whispered, "My name is Anne. Thank you for helping me. You don't know who I am, but one day, I'll repay your kindness." Sussan smiled and waved her hand. "Don't worry about repayment. Just be safe, and that's enough for me." And slept in Sussan's room that night. By morning, a black car stopped outside the compound, and a group of men in suits came out. Neighbors peeped from their windows, wondering what was happening. The men bowed to Anne as she stepped out of Sussan's room. "Miss Anne, we've been searching everywhere for you," one of them said. Sussan froze. She suddenly realized this was not an ordinary young woman, and smiled and turned to Sussan. "This is my driver and my father's men. My father is Mr. Zack, the CEO of Alpha Group. He's one of the richest men in the country. I didn't tell you last night because I wanted to see real kindness, not the fake one I always receive. Thank you for being genuine." Sussan gasped. She had heard about Alpha Group on the news, a company worth billions. And now she was standing with the daughter of the man himself. She felt unworthy, but Anne held her hands warmly. "You're different, Sussan," Anne whispered. "Please don't leave my life. In fact, I want you to marry my father." Sussan almost fainted. "What? Marry your father? How can I? I'm just a poor woman. Your father would never accept me." But Anne was determined. She believed Sussan's kindness was exactly what her father needed. That day was the beginning of a story Sussan never imagined. Sussan could not sleep that night. The words of and kept echoing in her head. "I want you to marry my father." She turned restlessly on her bed. How could she even imagine such a thing? Mr. Zack was not just any man. He was a billionaire CEO, the kind of person she only saw in newspapers or on television. She was just an ordinary woman with nothing to her name. People like her did not belong in his world. But Anne was serious. The next day, Anne came again to visit. She was dressed elegantly this time, her hair neatly styled, and she looked every bit like the daughter of a wealthy man. Yet her smile was warm and simple, just like before. "Sussan," she said, sitting beside her, "I told my father about you." Sussan's heart skipped. "What did you tell him?" "That you're the kindest woman I have ever met. That you helped me when you didn't know who I was. And that you're the only one I want as my stepmother." "Anne!" Sussan almost shouted, her eyes wide. "Don't joke with me like this. Your father will never agree. Please don't embarrass me." But Anne shook her head. "I know my father. He has money, yes. He has companies, cars and houses. But he has no peace. Since my mother died, he has been lonely. People come around him for his money, never for his heart. I want him to meet someone real, someone like you." Sussan's eyes softened. She could see the pain in Anne's words. She thought for a while but still whispered, But he will not accept me. You don't know my father, Anne replied with confidence. Just promise me you'll meet him. Before Sussan could argue more, Anne's phone rang. It was her father. After a short call, Anne smiled and said, "He wants to see you." Sussan almost fainted. Her legs trembled as Anne's car drove her to a quiet garden in the city. There, under the shade of tall trees, sat a man in plain clothes. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, nothing fancy. His hair had streaks of gray, and his smile was calm. "This is my father," Anne said softly. Sussan swallowed hard. She had expected a man in a sharp suit, surrounded by guards, looking powerful. But this man looked almost ordinary. "Good afternoon, sir," Sussan said shyly. "Please call me Zack," he replied warmly. His voice was deep but kind. "Anne has told me a lot about you. Thank you for taking care of my daughter when she needed help." Sussan nodded nervously. "It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Zack said, shaking his head. "Not everyone. Most people would have walked away. But you didn't. That makes you special." There was silence for a moment. Then Zack leaned forward and said, "And tells me she wants you to marry me." Sussan's face turned red instantly. "Sir, please, that's impossible. I am not from your world. I am just a poor woman. People will laugh at you if you marry me." Zack smiled, almost amused. "Do you think I care about what people say? I care about what makes my daughter happy. And she believes you can bring joy back into my life." Sussan looked at Anne, who was nodding with hopeful eyes. She felt trapped between kindness and fear. Finally she whispered, "I don't know, sir. I don't want to disappoint anyone." Zack stood up and said calmly, "Think about it. I'm not asking you to decide today. Just give yourself time." As they left the garden, and held Sussan's hand tightly. "Please don't say no. Just give my father a chance. I know you will be happy together." That night, Sussan sat on her bed and cried quietly. She wanted to run away from all this. She wanted to return to her simple life, where nobody expected her to marry a billionaire. Yet, deep inside, she felt touched by Zack's gentleness. He was not arrogant, not proud, not the type she imagined. He was human. And slowly, against her fears, a small voice inside whispered, "Maybe it is possible." A few days after their meeting in the garden, Zack began visiting Sussan regularly. He never came with bodyguards or flashy cars. Instead, he dressed in simple shirts and trousers, often carrying a small bag with fruits or bread to share with her. To anyone looking, he seemed like an ordinary man, maybe even poorer than Sussan herself. At first, Sussan felt awkward. She couldn't believe a man like him, rich, powerful and well-known, would choose to dress this way. She often asked herself, why is he hiding his true identity from me? But Zack seemed comfortable. He would sit with her in her small kitchen, laugh at her jokes, and even help peel vegetables. "You don't act like a rich man," Sussan told him one afternoon as they prepared a simple meal together. He chuckled. "And how do rich men act? They don't sit in a tiny kitchen sweating while cutting onions," she said with a laugh. "Well, maybe that's what makes me different," Zack replied, smiling softly. "I don't want to be treated like a billionaire. I want to be treated like a man." Something in his words touched her heart. Slowly, she began to relax around him. She even found herself enjoying his visits. But not everyone saw him the way she did. One Saturday, Zack suggested they take a walk together through the city market. Sussan was nervous. People already whispered about her when they saw her with a man. But she agreed. As they walked, they passed by a luxury jewelry store. The glitter of gold and diamonds sparkled through the glass window. Sussan stopped for a moment, admiring the beauty. She sighed and whispered, "These things are only for people with money. I can only dream." Zack noticed the longing in her eyes. "Do you want to go inside?" he asked gently. "Oh no," she said quickly. "We can't. They will laugh at us. Look at your clothes, look at me. We don't belong in there." But Zack smiled. Come on, just for fun. Window shopping doesn't cost anything. Hesitantly, she followed him inside. The store was bright and filled with shining display cases. The attendants looked at them from head to toe and frowned. They whispered among themselves, their eyes full of mockery. "Can I help you?" one attendant asked coldly. "Yes," Zack replied calmly. "We just want to look around." The attendant rolled her eyes. "Sir, these are not cheap trinkets. They are luxury jewels. Maybe you should try the market stalls outside." Sussan's face burned with shame. She wanted to leave immediately, but Zack held her hand gently, as if telling her not to worry. Just then, a familiar voice called out, "Well, well, look who we have here." It was Jane, Anne's friend, and her husband. Jane was dressed in a designer gown, her husband in an expensive suit. They both looked at Zack and Sussan with disgust. "Ha! You brought your beggar boyfriend to a jewelry store." Jane sneered at Sussan. "Do you even know how much a ring costs here? I bet you two can't afford even the dust on the glass." Her husband laughed loudly. "Look at his clothes. He probably borrowed them just to impress you." The store attendants laughed along. Sussan's hands trembled. She wanted to run away and hide. But Zack stood still, calm and unbothered. Jane continued, "You're a fool, Sussan. Dreaming of things beyond your reach. This shop is for people like us, not people like you." At that moment, the store manager came out from the back room. He saw Zack and immediately froze. His eyes widened. He quickly bowed slightly. "Good afternoon, sir," he said with respect. The attendants looked confused. Jane and her husband frowned. "Sir, why are you greeting this poor man like that?" Jane asked rudely. The manager gave her a sharp look. "Watch your tongue. You do not know who you are talking to." He turned to the attendants. "Is this how you treat customers here? Apologize at once." The attendants bowed their heads quickly, mumbling apologies. Jane and her husband stood speechless, their pride crushed. Zack smiled faintly and whispered to Sussan, "Let's go." As they walked out, Sussan whispered, "Why did the manager respect you like that?" Zack only winked and said softly, "Maybe he's just a kind man." That evening, back in her small room, Sussan sat quietly, replaying everything in her mind. She still didn't understand Zack. Who was he really? Why did the store manager treat him like a king while everyone else mocked him? Her heart was torn between doubt and admiration. But one thing was clear. This man was not ordinary. The sun was setting when Sussan and Zack walked home together after their visit to the jewelry store. Her mind was restless. She replayed every insult from Jane and her husband. The sneers of the attendants still stung. But the memory of the manager's sudden respect for Zack lingered even more strongly. Why did he act that way? She wondered. There's something about Zack that he's not telling me. As they walked, Sussan's eyes caught sight of something dazzling in a shop window. It was a wedding gown store. The mannequins wore gowns that sparkled under the lights, long flowing dresses with lace, pearls, and crystals. They were the kind of dresses she had only seen in magazines or on brides in wealthy families. She stopped, staring with wide eyes. Zack noticed. "Do you like them?" Sussan laughed nervously. "Like them? Of course. But they are not for people like me. They belong to rich brides, not poor women." Zack tilted his head. "What if we just go inside and look? You might enjoy it." Her heart raced. No, we can't. What if they embarrass us again, like at the jewelry store?" Zack smiled warmly. "Let's take the risk. Come on." Hesitant but excited, she followed him into the shop. Inside, the store sparkled like heaven. Dresses hung neatly on racks, each one looking like a dream. A few brides-to-be were already there with their families, trying on gowns and admiring themselves in the mirrors. The attendants looked up as Zack and Sussan entered. Their eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," one attendant said sharply. "Can we help you?" "Yes," Zack said politely. "We'd like to see some dresses." The attendant smirked. Are you sure you're in the right place? These dresses cost more than your entire salary." The other attendants giggled. Sussan's cheeks burned. She wanted to walk out, but Zack gently touched her arm, calming her. "Don't mind them," he whispered. Just as they moved toward one of the racks, laughter rang out behind them. "Well, if it isn't the beggar couple again," Jane's voice echoed across the shop. Sussan's heart sank. Jane and her husband had walked in, dressed even more extravagantly than before. Jane's eyes lit up when she saw Sussan staring at a gown. "You, trying on wedding dresses?" Jane laughed cruelly. "You couldn't even afford the thread used to sew these gowns." Her husband joined in. "Be careful, Jane. If she touches one, she might stain it with poverty." The attendants laughed openly this time, their voices full of mockery. One even whispered loudly, "It's like watching a fairy tale gone wrong." Tears welled up in Sussan's eyes. She wished the ground would open and swallow her. But Zack stood still, his expression calm and unreadable. "Which dress do you like?" he asked her softly. She shook her head quickly. "No, let's leave. They're right. I don't belong here." But Zack smiled. "Nonsense. Everyone deserves to feel beautiful. Pick one." His confidence gave her courage. Slowly, she pointed at a gown displayed in the corner. It was elegant but simple, with lace at the sleeves and tiny crystals at the waist. The attendant snorted. "That dress costs more than your life savings. But if you insist, try it on. Let's see how funny this will look." Jane clapped mockingly. "Yes, let her try. This will be entertaining." They dragged the dress toward Sussan, shoving it at her with no respect. Zack's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Inside the fitting room, Sussan's hands shook as she put on the gown. The soft fabric slid over her skin like silk. She looked at herself in the mirror and gasped. For the first time in her life, she felt like a bride, like a woman worthy of love. Her tears flowed freely, but this time they were not tears of shame. They were tears of joy. When she stepped out, the entire shop fell silent. The gown fit her perfectly. The crystals sparkled under the light, and the lace hugged her gently. She looked radiant, glowing like a bride from a fairy tale. Even Jane's mouth fell open for a moment before twisting into a scornful smile. "Beautiful dress, wasted on the wrong woman," Jane hissed. Her husband added, "She looks like a maid playing dress-up." The attendants laughed again. But just then the store manager walked in. He stopped, his eyes falling on Zack. Instantly his face changed. He hurried forward, bowing slightly. "Sir," the manager said respectfully, "I apologize deeply. Were you not treated well?" The attendants froze in shock. Jane's husband frowned. "Why are you speaking to this poor man with respect again?" The manager glared at them. "Quiet. You have no idea who he is." He turned to Sussan and smiled warmly. "Madam, you look stunning. That gown suits you perfectly. Please take your time." Sussan blinked in confusion. She didn't understand what was happening. But in her heart, she felt a strange warmth. Someone powerful respected Zack. But why? Zack took her hand gently. "You look beautiful, Sussan. Truly beautiful." Her heart skipped. For the first time, she believed his words. She smiled, glowing from within. The insults no longer mattered. For that one moment, she felt like the happiest woman alive. They left the shop hand in hand, Sussan smiling the entire way home. She kept whispering, "I never imagined I'd wear something like that." Zack only smiled, his eyes full of secrets. The night after the wedding gown fitting, Sussan could not sleep. She lay awake, replaying the entire day in her mind. The laughter of Jane, the cruel words of the attendants, the sudden respect from the store manager, and most of all, the way Zack had looked at her when she stepped out in the gown. Why does everyone who matters treat him with respect, while others see him as a poor man? Who exactly is this man? The question haunted her. Meanwhile, Zack sat in his mansion that night, staring out at the city lights. Though he was surrounded by luxury, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, golden staircases. His heart was restless. Pretending to be poor had allowed him to see Sussan's true heart, but the lie was growing heavier each day. He had promised himself he would reveal the truth soon, but he feared losing her. "Will she forgive me when she finds out?" he whispered to himself. The following week, Zack continued his visits to Sussan's humble home. They would cook together, take walks in the evening, and laugh about small things. Neighbors mocked them, whispering cruelly behind their backs. "Look at that woman," one neighbor said aloud. "Marrying a man who can't even buy her proper shoes. What a shame," another added. "They look like beggars playing husband and wife. She deserves pity." Sussan heard these words daily, but Zack never seemed moved. He would only smile faintly and squeeze her hand, as if telling her silently, "Don't mind them." But Sussan's heart ached. She wanted to protect him, yet she also wished she understood why people in high places respected him secretly. One evening Zack surprised her. "Sussan," he said softly, "I want to take you somewhere tomorrow." "Where?" she asked, curious. "You'll see. Just trust me." The next day he arrived early. Again he wore his simple clothes, blending into the crowd. He held her hand as they walked through the city streets. Eventually they arrived at a grand restaurant. The building sparkled with glass walls and golden lights. It was one of the finest in town. Sussan froze at the entrance. "Zack, we can't go in there. Look at us. They will throw us out." He smiled calmly. "Do you trust me?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Inside, the restaurant was filled with the wealthy. Men in suits, women in elegant dresses, chandeliers glittering above. The moment Zack and Sussan stepped in, the air changed. People turned to stare. Whispers began. "What are they doing here? They don't belong. Is this some kind of joke?" Sussan felt her face burn with shame. She held tightly to Zack's arm, wishing she could vanish. The hostess at the front desk frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, madam. This restaurant requires proper attire. Perhaps you should try somewhere else." Zack was about to respond when suddenly, the restaurant manager appeared. His eyes fell on Zack, and he immediately stiffened. Without hesitation, he bowed slightly and said, "Good evening, sir. Please follow me. Your table is ready." The hostess looked confused, but she dared not question. Other customers stared in shock. Sussan's heart pounded. Again, the same respect, the same mystery. She wanted to ask Zack right there, but she bit her tongue. Throughout the meal, Zack was gentle, talking to her about simple things. Her dreams, her favorite foods, her childhood memories. But she noticed his eyes carried a weight, as if something heavy sat on his mind. When they left, Jane and her husband were waiting outside. Well, look who we have here again," Jane sneered. "Did you two sneak in to smell the food? Or maybe you washed dishes in the back for scraps?" Her husband laughed. "You don't belong in places like this. Stop embarrassing yourselves." Sussan's eyes filled with tears. Before she could speak, the restaurant manager came rushing out. "Mr. Zack, forgive us for any inconvenience," he said respectfully, bowing again. Jane's laughter died instantly. "Mr. Zack," she repeated slowly, her face pale. Zack gave the manager a gentle nod, then turned to Sussan. "Let's go." They walked away, leaving Jane and her husband speechless. That night, Sussan could no longer hold it in. When Zack walked her home, she stopped at the door. "Zack," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who are you? Why does everyone important bow to you? Why do managers treat you like a king, while others mock you? Please, tell me the truth." Zack froze. His heart ached. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to remove the mask. But fear held him back. He cupped her hands in his and whispered, "Please give me a little more time. I promise you will know everything soon." Tears filled Sussan's eyes. She nodded slowly, but in her heart, the storm of doubt grew stronger. Zack walked away that night feeling heavier than ever. The disguise had protected his heart, but now it was threatening to destroy the trust he had built. He knew one thing for certain: the truth could no longer stay hidden for long. The weight of Zack's secret became too heavy to carry. That night, as he sat alone in his study, he could no longer ignore the storm inside him. He had built an empire worth billions, yet here he was, terrified of losing the only woman who saw him as a man, not a billionaire. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself. "Tomorrow, I will tell her everything." The next morning, Zack showed up at Sussan's small home, looking different. He wore a neatly pressed suit for the first time since she had met him. His shoes gleamed, and his watch sparkled with diamonds. His car, a sleek black limousine, was parked outside, drawing the attention of the entire neighborhood. Children stopped playing, neighbors gathered, mouths open in shock. Sussan stepped out of her door, confused. "Zack, what is all this?" He took a deep breath. "Sussan, please, we need to talk." She frowned, already sensing something was wrong. "Talk about what?" He looked into her eyes, his voice steady but soft. "The truth. About who I am." Her heart pounded. She whispered, "Who are you, Zack?" He gestured toward the car. "Come with me, please." They drove in silence until they reached the towering headquarters of Alpha Group. The building gleamed like a monument of power, its glass walls shining under the morning sun. Security guards saluted as the limousine pulled in. Sussan's eyes widened. He turned to Zack. "Why are they saluting you?" He said nothing. He simply held her hand and led her inside. The moment they stepped into the lobby, workers and managers straightened their backs. Some bowed slightly. The receptionist stood quickly. "Good morning, sir." Sussan stopped walking. "Sir." "Zack, what's going on?" He turned to her, his face full of emotion. "Sussan, I'm not just Zack. I am Zack Daniels, CEO of Alpha Group." The words hit her like thunder. She blinked, shaking her head. No, that's not true." He nodded gently. "It is. I wanted to know if you could love me for who I am, not for my wealth. That is why I hid it. That is why I wore simple clothes. I needed to be sure." Her body trembled. She stepped back, tears filling her eyes. "You lied to me, Zack. You made me look like a fool. Do you know how many times people have insulted us? Do you know how I cried, wishing I could protect you? And all this time, you were a billionaire." Her voice broke. "You betrayed me." Zack's heart ached. He reached for her hands, but she pulled away. "Sussan, I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to find real love." She shook her head, crying. "Love is built on truth. And you hid the truth from me." He fell silent. For a moment, it seemed everything was lost. But then, he reached into his bag and pulled out a bouquet of red roses, a velvet box with diamonds, and a golden bracelet. He placed them in her trembling hands. "These things cannot heal the hurt," he said softly. "But they are a symbol of my apology. Please forgive me. I love you, Sussan. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who found peace in your kindness." Sussan looked at the flowers, the diamonds, the gold. But more than that, she looked at his face. His eyes full of sincerity, his voice trembling with vulnerability. She wiped her tears slowly. "You hurt me, Zack. But you also made me feel loved like no one ever did. You saw me when the world ignored me. You stood by me when people laughed at me." Her voice softened. "I don't need your billions. I only need your honesty. Promise me you'll never lie to me again." Zack's eyes filled with relief. He held her hands tightly. "I promise. From today, no more secrets." At that moment, Anne came rushing into the lobby, smiling brightly. "Daddy." "Listen." "Oh, thank God. You finally know the truth." She hugged them both. "I told you, Sussan. He needed someone real like you." The workers clapped softly, smiling at the scene. For once, it wasn't about money or power. It was about love. A week later, Sussan walked down the aisle in a beautiful gown. the very one she had tried on at the store. This time there were no insults, no mockery. Only admiration. Guests gasped at her beauty, and the world finally saw her not as a poor woman, but as the bride of a man who loved her deeply. Zack stood at the altar, waiting, his eyes never leaving her. When she reached him, he whispered, "You are my greatest treasure." Sussan smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. "And you are my peace." They exchanged vows, sealing their love with honesty, forgiveness, and a kiss that silenced every doubt. From that day forward, Sussan was no longer the woman mocked for loving a poor man. She was Mrs. Zack Daniels, the woman who captured the heart of a billionaire. Not with beauty, not with wealth, but with kindness. And together, they built a new chapter of life filled with laughter, respect, and love that money could never buy. If you enjoyed this story of love, kindness, and forgiveness, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Savvy Sam for more inspiring stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale.